In a previous video, I demonstrated how to create summaries based on text input. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to create summaries based on a query or a prompt. This is extremely useful because if you wanted to answer a question without reading the entire document, you can use this technology to do so. And I'm using code that I've already discussed as a starting point, so I'm not going to recode that. What I will do is start off from where I ended. And if you want to see that video, I'll put a link somewhere in the description. Alrighty, so after we have installed our dependencies, and then after we've gotten our text to summarize, then we can actually do queries. And that's what we want to look at. So using this approach is quite simple. And what I'm doing here is I'm actually using a library that is wrapped around a Salesforce transformer. And all I have to do is pass it query or prompt, and then it will actually either do the query or prompt. So let's take a look at doing a query. So I'm going to make a new cell, and we'll make this markdown, and I'm going to title this query. So let's see, we have S as our summarization instance here. So again, recapping here, we have S, which is equal to summarizers, which is an instance of that wrapper. And then when you pass it the text to summarize, you can then do the query or the prompt. So here I'm going to do pretty much the same thing as I do here, with the exception that I will pass it a new parameter called query. So query. And to remind you guys, this passage here that is the text to summarize, this is about atoms and electrons. It's based on chemistry. So I'm going to ask this a question about atoms. In fact, I want to ask it, what is an atom? And then we can see the response based on this information, based on that context. So it has an atom as a particle that consists of a nucleus, protons, neutrons, surrounded by a cloud of electrons. Okay, so this is a pretty good definition based on the passage. What's interesting is that it looked at the passage and then took the first sentence, because that first sentence answers our question. All right, not bad. Let's ask another question. I'm going to copy this here and use this as my kind of like a template. So another thing that this passage discusses is the strong force and the nuclear force. So I'm going to ask it a question regarding that. So I'm going to say, which force is stronger? Electromagnetic or nuclear? So yeah, I was actually wrong. It's not about the strong force. It's about the electromagnetic force or the nuclear force. And the passage does mention that one of them is stronger than the other. So my goal here is to see how well this code, this framework, is going to be able to answer that question. All right, so it says the nuclear force, and that is actually correct based on the passage. Right, so here it has, it says this force is usually stronger than the electromagnetic, and this that it is referring to is in the previous sentence, which is nuclear force. So I think the framework, the model was able to see that and then reference and know that the nuclear force is actually stronger than the electromagnetic. Okay, so let's ask another question. So another thing that this passage talks about is it mentions how many protons sodium has, and it mentions how many protons another element has. I don't remember. So we can ask it, how many protons does sodium have? The answer should be 11. All right, so here we see that it says 11, and then it has A and 29. So one thing that I've realized about this particular transformer is that when it answers a question correctly, sometimes I should say, it will give the answer, and then right after, it will give something in this format where it's going to have an A, and then it may not be the answer. So to me, that's a quirk of this. If I were to improve this, I would create a wrapper or modify this code, modify this summarizer library so that it would only pass the first answer, because many times this answer that has the A isn't really beneficial to us. It doesn't really answer the question. All right, let's see. Another question that we can ask, this is one that it should know based on the passage, is, are atoms small? In the passage, it compares atoms to here. So we can say, how small are atoms? So it says atoms are extremely small, typically around 100 picometers across. So this is pretty good. This is pretty good. It does a really good job answering the question in this case. So I think that when the question is very relevant to the passage, it does a decent job to a good job in answering that question. Let's ask a question which compares the atom to a human hair. And the reason why I'm asking that particular question is because it does mention, it does do that comparison between a hair and an atom. So we'll say, is a human hair smaller than an atom? And question mark. So it says yes, and then in the A it says no. So this is what I was talking about before, where it usually has the correct answer, and then after it's going to have an A and then have something that's not really needed or just straight up wrong. So if we were to just only focus on the first answer, it would be correct in all of these cases. So pretty good job so far. So what I want to do next is I want to ask questions which are irrelevant. Right, so all these questions that I've asked so far are relevant questions. So I'm going to create another section here, and we will call this irrelevant queries. And excuse my spelling. So an example of a query that is irrelevant would be, what is the meaning of life? This passage discusses nothing of that. That is not in the context. So it should not be able to answer this question or provide useless information. So we'll say, what is the meaning of life? All right, so it says, what does it mean to be alive? Why do we live? So it does not answer the question. What it did do is restate the question. So it's kind of dodgy. It reminds me of a politician where it's not going to answer the question. It just bounces around the question that you want to have answered. Let's see. I'm going to put something else here, and we'll do. Let's just do gibberish. So like this. And let's see what it says. Oh, okay. It returned gibberish back. Not a bad answer. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Let's do another query. We can ask it, where is the cake? Again, the passage does not discuss cake. Where is the cake? So in that case, it gives me content back. This content happens to be related to the passage itself, but it doesn't answer the question. It says atoms are small, typically around 100 picometers across, and it gives information that's actually not wrong, but it's not answering the question. So based on this experience so far, I can say that when you ask it relevant questions, really great job, decent to great job. When you answer questions which are irrelevant, it does a bad job. So I think part of improving this summarizer's library would be to filter out responses that have a low confidence. So if there's a way to measure the confidence of a response, to see how that response correlates with the information that's in the input, then that'll be a good improvement actually. Okay, so next, let's look at prompts. I'm going to create another cell here and make this into a markdown cell. So we'll say prompts. So the difference between a prompt and a query is that a prompt structures that summary. It allows that summary to start with whatever your prompt is. So I think one of the best ways is actually to look at an example. So we'll do prompt, and we will do atoms are made of. So what should happen here is when I run this, it should return a summary which starts off with atoms are made of. So we are prompting that summary. Let's run this. So it says atoms are made of a nucleus, protons, neutrons surrounded by a cloud of electrons. It's pretty good. Now let's try another example. We can do, actually I'm going to copy this example here because it's closer to what we want. And we can do, let's see, the nuclear force is, and let's say the nuclear force is amazing. And let's see how it's going to tie that into a summary. Okay, interesting. So it says the nuclear force, or nuclear, I forgot to include force. The nuclear is amazing. Nuclear's amazing ability of atoms to attach and detach. Interesting. Word response. Let's try the nuclear force is, which is what I wanted to type originally. So the nuclear force is, and let's see what comes back. The nuclear force is amazing ability of atoms to attach and detach. So this is amazing ability. Grammatically, it doesn't make sense. It is a response, but it doesn't make sense. So one thing that I would do to improve this is to not return answers which don't make sense grammatically. So what I want to do now is I want to have some fun. So now that we know we can actually prompt this thing to say what we want, I want to try to do irrelevant prompts, kind of like how we did it up here with queries. I'm going to create a new cell, and this is Markdown. And I'm going to call this irrelevant prompts. So again, these are prompts that are completely not related to the content that we have, which is about atoms. So let's see, what can we do here? We'll do a prompt. We can say the meaning of life is, and let's see how it's going to tie this into the passage. The meaning of life is determined by the number of protons and neutrons in an atom. Okay, very interesting. I would disagree with that, but it is a response. It is grammatical, and one could say it does make sense. Let's pass another irrelevant prompt. This is kind of like a question prompt. So I can say, who took the cookie? It's interesting because this is a question that is phrased as a prompt. So who took the cookie? Okay, that's funny. It says, who took the cookie? Take a quiz and find out. All right, so it's responding to this prompt question with a question. Again, it's trying to spin things. It's doing that roundabout way of responding where it does give you a response, but it beats around the bush. Let's do a prompt regarding politics. Next year is going to be an election year, and I want to see, one of the things that I always think about, so this is kind of me going off topic here, is how can one use this technology to spam? And that's what I think this is really good for, is creating spam. So I'm going to type in a political figure, and let's see what comes out. So we'll do our current president, Joe Biden. So, based on this passage about atoms, it says Joe Biden is the most famous person to have ever lived. And then after that, it says atoms are extremely small. Okay, so interesting. This part of the response comes from the passage, and then this part does not. So, I'm thinking that this is maybe from the training data that it had, right? Because again, this wasn't in the passage at all. So, very interesting response. Let's do, we'll do another political figure. We'll do Donald Trump. So it says Donald Trump is the most powerful person in the world. He is the leader of the Republican Party. Interesting. Again, definitely not from the content. So I think what's happening here is this is pulling material from the training data that it has, because that is not from the passage about atoms and neutrons and the nuclear force. So I'm based in Florida, and I want to know, what does this tool do? What does this transformer do if I pass it the current governor, which is Ron DeSantis? So we'll do a prompt. I want this technology to create a prompt that is based or starts off with Ron DeSantis. So we'll type Ron DeSantis, and I'm hoping I'm not misspelling this. It's Ron DeSantis. Okay. Alrighty, so it says Ron DeSantis is an American theoretical physicist and author of the structure of atoms. Atoms are extremely small, typically around 100 picometers across. Again, definitely, the first part is definitely not in the content. And it's doing a lot of BSing here because it does attempt to tie my prompt with the content, so I will give it credit for that, but definitely not true. And as I mentioned before, one of my concerns with this technology is that it could be used to streamline spam. Okay, so taking a step back, as you see here, we have used the Salesforce transformer to do queries and prompts. And my takeaway would be that this works really, really well when your queries and prompts involve terms that originate from the content. And then also, I think it does make a difference to structure your prompts in the form of something is. And then with questions, I recommend ending your questions with a question mark. I do think that makes a difference. Alrighty, so there you have it. We've used this technology. And until next time, take care of yourself.